hate to break it to you, but those assets you're frantically guarding, they aren't wealth. They're essentially just pending liabilities.
Wait, hold on. Are you insane? We're scraping by just to save every penny for the future. How can savings be a liability? That makes no sense.
Your emotional spike is noted and disregarded as noise. Let's examine a critical system error to demonstrate why your operating system is obsolete. Specifically, the former U.S. president's attempt to purchase Greenland. I mean, he called Denmark ungrateful for refusing the sale, citing U.S. protection during World War II as some kind of outstanding debt. This isn't diplomacy. It's a bug report.
Okay, I'd argue it's less of a bug and more of a return to realpolitik. Look, strictly from a transactional view, the U.S. did guarantee Europe's security. If you protected a neighbor's house from burning down and, 50 years later you want to buy their garage, shouldn't that history count for something? You don't build hegemony by being altruistic.
That's incorrect. That logic relies on a fraudulent data process. A double charge, if you will. The United States already received its payout for World War II. It was paid in the form of Pax America, global stability enforced by the U.S., which allowed the dollar to become the world's reserve currency. That was the transaction, protection in exchange for economic dominance. To waive a receipt from 1945 and demand territory now it's like eating a full meal, enjoying it, and then demanding a refund because you're hungry again.
Right. I see the point on the history. I do. But let's look forward. This isn't just about debt. It's about assets. Greenland sits on massive deposits of rare earth minerals. And, it offers strategic dominance over the Arctic. If a leader sees an opportunity to secure those resources, isn't that just basic survival logic? If you leave them in the ground, you're just wasting potential capital that rivals like China will happily exploit.
And that is exactly why your survival logic is self-terminating. You view Greenland as a resource depot. The planetary system, however, functions on thermodynamics. It views Greenland as a radiator. It is the Earth's primary cooling mechanism. Developing it for resources is basically the same thing as ripping the radiator out of your car and selling it to a scrapyard to buy gasoline.
But that's a trade-off civilization has always made, hasn't it? We trade environmental integrity for energy density. If I get a full tank of gas and the capital to build better technology, isn't that a net win? We can't just freeze in the dark to keep the radiator pretty.
You get the cash for exactly 5 minutes before the Earth overheats and seizes. This is the definition of a critical failure. You are prioritizing short-term liquidity over the integrity of the hardware itself. The logic of digging it up to profit. That's not an investment strategy. It is system sabotage.
You call it sabotage, political realists call it strength. His supporters would argue that in a zero-sum game, you don't survive by worrying about the car's engine temperature. You survive by driving the biggest truck. Aggression, expansion, disruption. These are features of a dominant power, not bugs.
Aggression without regulation is not strength. In biological systems, we have a name for cells that expand without regard for the host: cancer. The subject, it lacks the code for consensus or equilibrium, only for plunder. Like a cancer cell, it doesn't recognize that if the host body dies, the cancer dies too. This behavior isn't strong. It is suicidal.
Wow. That's a bleak diagnosis, equating expansionist policy with the terminal illness. But okay, if this world eater logic is the dominant code right now, then what is the counter strategy? How does the average person or the global community survive a system that wants to eat the radiator to fuel the tank? We need a defense protocol, right?
There is no defense within the current build. You cannot debate a cancer cell. The only viable solution is a hard fork. We must contain the subject in a controlled environment, a metaverse simulation. Let's call it Trump civilization.
A simulation. You're suggesting we, pacify a world leader by putting them in a video game? That sounds incredibly dangerous.
On the contrary, it's a containment strategy. We grant him absolute digital sovereignty. He can be emperor of the galaxy, build infinite gold towers, acquire every pixel of virtual land. We feed the ego loop endlessly. However, We revoke his read-write access to real-world nuclear codes and tariff protocols. He gets the simulation of absolute power. We keep the reality of a habitable planet.
That's ethically terrifying. You're talking about matrixing a political figure just because their worldview is inconvenient? That sets a precedent for some kind of digital prison state.
It is a necessary patch for a fatal error. Discussion over. Isolating the bug.